Hello, hello. It's 2022. Can you believe it? Because I cannot. Time flew by. I cannot believe it is January 7th already for 2022. And here's hoping for a good year where we can be back in person. But given everything that's happening, I'm not having a lot of hope, but I'm gonna live in that little bit of space right now. And here's hoping to a good 2022. Every month, first Friday of the month, I'll come online, sometimes to rant, and sometimes to give tips depending on what's coming up for the year. And today's first Friday, January of 2022, just hitting it right off the bat, just going to go right into it right away, because it never fails at the end of the years when a lot of companies do their performance reviews, and I get inundated with like, what do I do with this, and frustrations when it comes to anonymous feedback, people, the dangers of anonymous feedback. But let's be positive for a second. And a lot of people kind of go, but Trisha, making it anonymous allows people to be honest and direct and really hear the things that they have to hear. Okay, let's go with that for just a brief second. And let's highlight what the consequences of that is. Because what you might be finding, the very thing you're trying to create in honesty and connection and teamwork, is the very thing that anonymous feedback can destroy, often destroys. So I'm going to give 5 kind of biggest consequences, side effects that I see, and they're interrelated. They do go together, but I'm going to kind of break them apart a little bit. The first one I want to talk about is just when you receive feedback, there is never a time when you don't have a question. You need a clarification. You need to better understand it, internalize. Nowhere and never have I ever seen somebody get a piece of feedback, read it, and go, oh, okay, I totally get it. Like, this doesn't happen. The need to have questions, the need to engage, the need to understand something is there. And so just getting something anonymous doesn't end up resulting in a person being able to really internalize it, because they can't ask those questions. Who are they asking the questions to? 2, I'll swap to the other side. When you know you're giving anonymous feedback, it's kind of like why I'm very minimal on Twitter, because there's a dynamic of when you think you're anonymous, you don't worry about making it sound inviting or good spirited. You just, smack it right across the face with the feedback. And the problem with that is it just brings up people's defensive mechanisms, right? If I were to get feedback that was just like, you interrupt everybody all the time, it's like, well, first of all, I'm going to have questions. Second of all, that's not really accurate, especially from my lens of what I'm thinking, because when I talk, I think. And so that's part of my problem. And I've got to get that out there. But the problem is when it comes so hard and so direct and without any kind of understanding or compassion within the feedback, because the person knows I don't have to face it. I don't have to deal with it. I'm just going to tell them the truth and land it. And if they don't like it, that's their problem. Well, no, it's your problem, because if I don't like it and it's hard or it's dismissive, it's rude, it's easy for me to invalidate, then I'm not actually learning or growing anything from it either. And then my defensive mechanism starts coming up. I might project, I could, rationalize, I could do lots of things, but none of them will be trying to fix the feedback that you're giving me. The third, when we're in a team, we have to learn how to embrace conflict. Conflict's not drama. It's not a negative thing. It's not something that we have to avoid. In fact, when we do try to avoid it, this is when we have to do things like anonymous feedback, because people can't engage with each other. Only that's increasing the conflict, and it's escalating the conflict in ways that is not helpful to people. It's easy when someone sends me an anonymous feedback, and you're like, let me actually stop and think about, so, like, when I'm speaking at a conference, I remember getting a feedback form, and it's anonymous. You don't know who it's coming. And at the very start, I was very like every piece of feedback and what could I do differently and where was I at, and I, well, maybe that's just my brain always, but over analyzing, super heavily focused on any kind of criticisms. And the title of it was something like, I don't know, let's just say it was like 5 tips of dealing with, 5 dangers of anonymous feedback. And it was like very clear, like 5 tips. And then the feedback was something to the effect of, you should have given more. It's like, but I said I was giving 5 tips. Like, and so it gets really easy for me to get that defensive mechanism going because I don't have anybody to ask questions to. And then I start feeling like, honestly, a little bit of a victim. And it's easy to put yourself in that mind space because you don't have anybody to engage with it on it to where it's making it actually productive and healthy conflict that's helping you to grow and to learn and to develop. And the sad part is that person might have had great actual feedback or an idea of something that I could have done, but because I had no one to have the conversation with, I had no one to ask the questions with, I had no one to engage with me on it, so they could just kind of write the line. Didn't matter if I understood it or not because it wasn't their problem. But then it became not my problem either. And so we're not actually helping our teams to come together to really learn how to have conflict and be able to engage in those things, which builds on this next one of, if I have nobody to ask questions to, my defense mechanisms are up because it's not worded in the best of ways because they didn't have to care about that. I'm not engaging in any kind of conflict, so I don't really feel any kind of trust. I'm not building the muscle that's necessary for us to deal with our differences, our preferences, our styles. People will comment and things like, well, I wanted you to do 10 tips. Okay, well, let me understand why. I may still not choose to do that, but then I'm engaging in a relationship and a conversation about what it is behind your need that I may be able to solve in a different way. Your solution, your feedback solution is always delivered that may not meet my needs too. And so when we give anonymous feedback, often we're giving it with this, like, honestly, a little bit of a smack, trying to shame somebody. Or we're giving it in a way that we're like, we know what you have to do, so just do the solution. And doesn't work in teams to just tell people what to do. And it doesn't work within feedback along those lines either. And so often when that's still being delivered, then it's used as a weapon later because then it's like, well, we told you, you got that in your anonymous feedback and you're still not doing it. It's like, well, of course I'm not, because I didn't feel any sense of support or any sense of who really wants me to get better at this. I honestly just felt shamed or as a victim or defensive with those things. And so if I'm feeling all those things, you're like, well, probably not going to be the best teammate. Now you could argue, but Trisha, you're a professional, suck it up, just deal with it. Okay. And I'm a human too. And a lot of these humans that you keep trying to just tell to suck it up are getting inundated with this kind of information. And sometimes it's not even bad. That's the worst part, is anonymous feedback can be interpreted as bad or critique when it wasn't. We had a scenario where I was co-speaking with somebody and I was super nervous because I was more experienced speaking and this person wasn't, as it was just kind of getting into it. And I just really, really, really wanted this individual to feel like my partner and my peer. And so I was very, very cautious about like interrupting or taking over or anything along those lines. And we get feedback at the end. And I don't remember exactly what the feedback was, but the feedback was something to the effect of being able to be heard more. And I interpreted that as I squashed this other person. And I was like, no, I tried so hard. I was so frustrated. I was so, by chance, we ended up seeing the person who gave that feedback and was willing to not be anonymous about it and actually explained it. And he meant something totally different than what we had interpreted. what I had interpreted. And that's part of the problem with anonymous feedback is even when you think you're being crystal clear, because I can't ask questions, because it's avoiding of conflict by being anonymous, because it's not worded in a way that you're worried about engaging with it, often it's misunderstood. It's misreceived. And none of that, again, is helping your team in any form or fashion. And the last one that I'm going to highlight, the fifth one, is it really anonymous? How many, just like you don't have to put it in the comments. You don't have to tell anybody. Okay, you can be anonymous with this answer. The irony there, okay? But whenever you've got not anonymous feedback, we all try to figure out who said it. We all try to figure out who said what, who was doing what, who thought that. We may even ask a few people questions depending on what it is. We do it because we're human and it doesn't feel good. And it makes us question who is our colleague, who do we have trust with, who is supporting us, who is listening to us, who is with us in this. Anonymous just makes us what's that saying? In the absence of information, we will create stories. Oh, we're good at it. And in the absence of actually putting your name to something, we will create stories. And if you don't think that happens and you think it stays completely anonymous, that's awfully cute. And here's hoping 2022 stays as sunshine and rainbows for you for the rest of this year. But the reality is, doesn't happen that way. Now, are there times that you have to deal with anonymous because there's severe psychological safety issues on many different fronts? Maybe. But are there better routes to dealing with it? Is there a way that you can create a space where you're easing into that conflict, easing into that discussion, where you can keep the safety there, but not create trust issues, esteem issues, say fairness issues? Anonymous doesn't help you become a team. It will break your team down faster than ever. And maybe you're like, but Trisha, we do it and it's always all good. I'm going to question either your team is actually really good and they're not needing to highlight any kind of challenging statements. And in that case, I have to wonder how much you're challenging yourselves, because there's always room for growth. Always room for growth, right? But how much you're doing those things, or how much you're just saying the nice things, being civil. And if we're just being civil, we're not leveraging the wisdom of the crowd. We're not actually being a team. We're not getting the most out of each other and seeing what each other is possible from. And so anonymous doesn't help us do that. Anonymous actually derails it. You're creating less safety from that with the consequences, because you're not helping people learn how to tell the feedback directly for themselves. It's not easy. And it still doesn't feel great. I'll still maybe get defensive, but it's a lot easier for me to get less defensive when someone's coming to me because they care, because they want to see me succeed, because they're invested in me to tell me this information, than to send it on a form that I feel like is just being tracked by my employer and I have no way of discussing it. I either have to accept it or find out who said it behind the scenes. None of that's good. So start small, try different things. But if I have a New Year's hope, anonymous feedback goes to the wayside. That will be my 2022 wish for the year, starting off and seeing where it is. But hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was helpful in terms of thinking about those other side effects that maybe our good intent of trying to create safety, we might be hurting safety instead. In terms of things coming up, I have very limited public things coming up. I do have a CSM coming up on January 18th, 19th, and I think there's like 2 spots left in it. If you have any kind of hardship going on as well right now and you're looking in those areas, just message me on LinkedIn. Private message me, not publicly, please don't do that. But privately message me on LinkedIn and I'll help out. I also have an impactful training and speaking. I don't do this course very often, but I have a lot of people that always are trying to speak more, get more involved in conferences and meetups and things like that. And so I offer this course to kind of just help mostly leaders in general in terms of just creating that impactful presence when they're training and or speaking. I do have a couple workshops on just I think it's the February 3rd for conflict as well as microaggressions. But after that, I only have one ACSM in February with the Agile for Humanity conference that you can sign up for. And I'm not sure how many spots are left in that because it's through the conference. But that's all for me publicly for the couple months. So if you're looking for other things, just ping me. I'm happy to point you in different directions. But hopefully the one direction I pointed you in for the start of this year, anonymous feedback goes away. Bye-bye. No more. Stop it. Stop it. It's not helping you. It's not helping them. With that, see you in February.